Hi everyone, I'm Steven, and today I'm going to use cardboard to finally make Spider-Man's web shooters from the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Let's jump right into it. I made a template off camera, and FYI, the template I linked to is a little different than the one that's in the video. I cleaned it up for you guys in the final version, so it would be a little bit easier to follow. With that said, I'll switch back to our regularly scheduled programming. I started off with this top piece. It's the base of the whole web shooter. I taped it onto a piece of cardboard that I took from a family-sized cereal box. It's a little bit thicker and less bendy than regular cereal boxes. The lines that are inside of the template are going to get scored. That just means that I don't cut all the way through when I'm slicing through with my X-Acto blade. Scored lines will help the piece bend. See? It bends, and it'll fit the shape of my arm. So moving on to the other bits. These pieces get cut out of the regular flimsy cereal boxes. This weird looking template piece gets folded together so it becomes 3D, and I'm going to call it the 3D piece from now on. It's a little tricky to cut out, but the key is to score 3 lines on the front, and then 2 on the back when you flip it over. Scoring the lines like this is going to allow you to fold it into 2 different directions and fold it up into a 3D little piece. Don't worry, it's color-coded on the template, and it only takes a minute to actually cut out. Here's a hot tip if you're following along and making this yourself. Add some extra tape during the cutting process to help keep all the sliced up pieces of the template in place. But yeah, once the top and bottom are scored and it's completely cut out, I'll fold it into a 3D shape and it fits perfectly on top of the base. Yay! I also cut out the remaining pieces from the same flimsy cereal box. That includes the 2 slanted rectangles, the funky looking bottom piece, and the piece that I'm calling the jacket. The jacket is the top layer of everything, and it gets cut in the same way as the 3D piece in the previous step. So 2 lightly scored lines on the front side, and flip it over, and do 2 lightly scored lines on the back side in different positions. Once again, those cuts allowed me to fold nice crisp lines and make everything look really neat. Once folded, it fits right on top. And to be honest, that's basically the web shooter. So let's start assembling it. I started off by taking the base and the 3D piece, lining up both corners and then using a pen to mark down where I lined it up. I then used super glue to glue down those rectangles right in the position where I marked down with my pen. I let that glue dry and then used more super glue to glue the 3D piece right on top of it by lining up the corners, and fits in perfectly. The little jacket piece was then carefully glued on top until it was perfectly and beautifully placed and my fingers were covered in super glue. Oh yeah, and I also glued in the funky looking bottom piece. It slides right in. After that, I covered the entire web shooter in super glue. This super glue just makes it super hard. Another hot tip, open a window and use a mask because super glue fumes are nasty. Time to flip it over and work on the underside. Using scissors, I snipped out the little support rectangle on the base piece. Removing it just gives me room to fit in the shooting mechanism. Speaking of the shooting mechanism, it's basically just rolled up paper with a spring that's shoved inside of it. I took one of the rectangles from the template that I made, rolled it up, and super glued it so it wouldn't unravel. One end of this roll sticks out a little bit from the web shooter, and that end needs some extra detailing rolled around it. This means just taking some more strips from the template, strips of paper, and rolling it around the end of it. And that's done 2 times because there's 2 rolls. Next was taking 2 old pens and taking the spring out of them. The springs are really easy to twist together, so they become one long spring. I unraveled one of the ends of the spring just a little bit, and it was just enough so I can have this tiny piece poking out that wasn't curled around. I used that to poke a small hole in a tiny piece of cereal box cardboard scraps that I super glued onto the end of the rolled up paper. I poked that little metal piece through and then put a huge dollop of hot glue on it to hold it in place. The excess was trimmed off, so it ended up just being a nice little circle at the end of the tube. But I also added a little bit of extra reinforcement with some tape and some glue to help reinforce it so it wouldn't break apart when I was constantly shoving paper bullets into the tube. And speaking of bullets,
I take my laser gun and I go pew pew pew!
You guessed it, the paper bullets are more rolled up paper. I just made sure to cover them in a lot of super glue so that they would stay hard. After that, I moved on to the stop block. Now, I will readily admit that this took me a few tries, but the steps are the same regardless. A tiny rectangle of cereal box cardboard was stacked together in 3 layers. This stack was bent so it would look like a capital L, and then covered completely in super glue so it would become super hard. Then I put that off to the side and I'm going to come back to it later. So the web shooter, the shooting mechanism, bullets, and the stop block were all done. Onto the cartridge. It's basically just a rolled up piece of cereal box cardboard that I lightly squished down with my fingers to make it oval shape, and then I slid it over the shooting mechanism. I super glued it all into place and then moved on to the little jut out sections at the top corners of the web shooter. These are just little jut outs on either side of the paper tube. For these pieces, I just used some layers of cereal box cardboard that I had stacked together. I cut them out and then glued them on. Easy peasy. But I actually want to backtrack to the stop block for a second. As you can see in the video, I cut out a longer one off camera. However, I ended up ripping this one off and then using the shorter one, but both are connected in exactly the same way. It's a strip of cereal box cardboard that gets glued to the underside of the stop block and the cartridge. When you do it like that, you'll be able to bend the cardboard so it acts like a hinge, and you can pull it down and then the bullet can shoot out, and then you can push it back up and the bullet will stay in. Basically, you can still wiggle it back and forth. Anyway, the wrist strap is just a rectangle of cereal box cardboard that fits around my wrist, and with that, it was time to paint. I used black craft paint, red craft paint, and silver craft paint. The top of the web shooter is mostly red. It took a few coats until I got the candy apple color red that I really wanted. A few details were painted in black, in addition to the wrist strap, and then the slanted little rectangles got painted in silver. I also took a pen and drew on 4 lines on the silver pieces. The actual web shooter has 5 sections, but I thought that 4 looked a little bit better on the cardboard prop, so I did 4. Once all the paint was dried, I glued on the strap and decided the springs were a little bit too long, so I just trimmed it down so it wouldn't stick out anymore. But now on to the final and probably the most important piece, the trigger. To make the trigger, I stacked together 4 layers of cereal box cardboard, bent it into an ergonomical, slightly curved shape, and doused it in super glue so it stays super hard. I then super glued it to the bottom of the stop block. To help give the stop block a little bit of extra support, I also put a slanted piece of cardboard onto a dollop of hot glue on the outside edge of the stop block. This helps support it, so when I'm pushing in lots of bullets and they're getting shot out, it just helps give it a little bit extra support so there's less wear and tear on the cardboard. And with that, the web shooter was complete. On to the glamour shots. So there you have it, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 web shooter made completely from cardboard. And it shoots! As always, the template is linked in the description of the video, and feel free to drop a comment if you decide to make it for yourself. Anyway, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye-bye! It's a little slippery for my big sausage fingers.